This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com with my weekly review of the points I find interesting in Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter. There's a lot more in there that I don't talk about, and it's not that expensive. I suggest people get it themselves if they want to know all the details. A lot of this week's Observer had to do with the passing of superstar Billy Graham. And there's so much on Billy Graham, who by the way was the first wrestler that apparently really caught Dave Meltzer's eye back in the days of the San Francisco territory. I'm gonna do a whole separate thing on Billy Graham's career and death tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow, and I'll go over some of the points that Meltzer brought up in the Observer about Billy Graham, such as something Billy never told me, although I do know Billy was a fan of Batista, that at one point WWE was apparently considering having Billy Graham manage Batista when Batista was first getting into the company. But there's so much about Billy. I'm not going to throw it into this Observer review because there's already a lot in this week's. There's a ton of news. By the way, the Blood Hunter versus James Storm match from Great North Wrestling's Ottawa event is now posted. I put the link in the description. All of the matches from the Great North Wrestling Ottawa event are now posted on the Hannibal TV, and our next event is July 15th in Smith Falls. But I'll shut up now, and I'll get right into the news. Apparently, Bray Wyatt is no longer listed on the internal WWE roster. It's unsure what this exactly means. He originally was ill when he disappeared from the roster, but apparently there's issues with him in creative right now, and Alexa Bliss returning might have something to do with it. But I don't know. From reports I've heard, he makes about $4 million a year. And when was the last time he wrestled? The Royal Rumble, the Lights Out match. That must be nice, because in the days of Billy Graham, you had to work to get paid. In other WWE news, more news came out about the merger. The WWE and UFC company is going to be known as TKO Group Holdings, owned, of course, by Endeavor, with UFC having 57% of the company, WWE having 43% of the company. Even though WWE has higher profits, I guess you could say UFC is the hotter company. Although I would say John Jones is the UFC's biggest star right now, and he may only have a few fights left. I mean, McGregor will probably fight again, but I don't know how many actual new big stars they have, but they're sure drawing real well. And we'll get into that more later. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 with Batista, speaking of Batista, was number one at the box office again for its second weekend, which is amazing. And so far, it's had 541 million worldwide. So Batista is catching up to The Rock. I've met him a few times, which you won't remember, backstage at various events when I was doing extra jobs. I actually been in the ring with him once when he was practicing stuff on me in Calgary. Great, nice guy in my meetings with him. He was like a lot of those guys when you're an extra. I mean, back in those days, it could be different now. They're less seasoned now. They don't have to work as hard for their spots now. But at that time, some of the guys were very egotistical. But Batista seemed nice. Any of the brief interactions I ever had with him, and I like him. I even went to see his Cabin movie. I hate superhero movies. I did see the first Guardians of the Galaxy literally just for Batista, just to support a wrestler in a major movie. But I honestly, and this is nothing against Batista, I fall asleep in movies easily, and I fell asleep a bunch of times in that one. So I'll hold off seeing the other two, but wish him the best with it. Apparently, Dwayne Johnson has made up with the cast of Fast and Furious, the new Fast 10 movie. He appears in the credits. It's his character, Luke Hobbs. Of course, John Cena is now in the franchise, and it's believed The Rock might be back in the next episode of the franchise. I've liked some of them, and I haven't liked. I think I saw the first one that Cena was involved with, but they're all right. Apparently, two class action suits filed by stockholders against WWE were settled by Vince McMahon this week. He agreed to pay $1.65 million in attorney fees. The lawsuits were claiming McMahon switched the company bylaws around to give him enough power to return to the company after they didn't want him to return to the company. So, I mean, he was always the true owner of the company, and I never for 1 second, and I always report the news. I never believed he was retired. You guys can go back and look around July and August at my reports. I never for 1 second believed that he was. WWE President Nick Khan this week said they were going to India for a live event in September. He also said that in TV rights fees, he's expecting big increases. Low end prediction from him would be $397.5 million a year for Raw and $307.5 million a year for SmackDown. Surprising lower for SmackDown, since SmackDown usually gets higher ratings and is widely considered the better show. Apparently, WWE purchased the Poffo family's ICW tape library. Bobby Roode, the beer money partner of James Storm, who's still under WWE contract. James Storm, as I said. His match against Blood Hunter is now on the Hannibal TV, link in the description. He had his second spinal fusion surgery on May 11th, which was his 47th birthday. He also had C4 and C5 vertebrae fused, I guess. And C5 and C6 also fused back in November. So, maybe if he had those injuries in the WWE ring, they're keeping him under contract to avoid getting sued and taking good care of him. But this seems fairly serious stuff. I don't know if he should return if his injuries are that serious and he's 47. But I like Bobby Roode. Speaking of that match, and here's a piece of history, a little trivia note. That Calgary Raw that I wrestled Batista on a bit before the show, Bobby Roode was an extra at that Raw as well and had a dark match. Apparently, Drew McIntyre's delay in returning is a creative issue. He's likely not going anywhere anytime soon because for the time he's been off, they can tack it on to the end of his contract. And his contract isn't ending imminently or anything, but maybe next year, if he can't come to a new agreement, he'll go to AEW. Who knows? Apparently, Bad Bunny on May 5th did a run-in at the SmackDown in Puerto Rico wearing a WWF jacket that he had, which apparently nobody told him that logo was banned, so that apparently caused some issues. This is a weird story. Apparently, WWE had a house show, or has a house show, tomorrow night in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Fayetteville, I don't know how you say it. I've never actually been to North Carolina. It's one of the states I never have been to, or South Carolina for that matter. But anyways, on May the 17th, they only had 3,816 tickets out, including comps. And they announced that Roman Reigns would be appearing. And between then and recently, I guess, they sold about 800 more tickets. to put it around 4,500. And strangely enough, after this, they said for no explained reason that Roman Reigns will no longer be on the show. Maybe the ticket change wasn't enough to merit what they were going to have to pay Roman Reigns. Who knows? But it's weird to announce a guy and then not have him on the show. By the way, AEW ran 2 house shows over the weekend where Britt Baker and Jon Moxley were advertised, but not on the shows, which is strange because that's a big company. You'd think that they would have the wrestlers show up, especially a name like Moxley. But May 12th in Corbin, Kentucky, they only had 1,872 fans. May 13th in Salem, Virginia, they had 2,132. And Meltzer brings up that even when WWE was less popular, they were doing much bigger numbers than that in those markets. And he's not sure what AEW's goals are for their house shows. In ratings news, or actually, no, I'll tell you more house shows. WWE hardly does house shows anymore. Their wrestlers have it pretty easy, but I guess May 13th, WWE was in Augusta, Georgia, where they drew 4,260, which was up 53% from the last time they were there when they just had just over 2,000. And then May the 14th, in North Charleston, South Carolina, they had 4,011, which was also up from last time they were in that market. Dynamite this week from Austin, Texas, one of my favorite states, had 4,100 paid, 0.28 rating. Apparently, TNT aired a Rich and Shameless episode about Hulk Hogan's lawsuit with Gawker that did a 0.3 rating, which is pretty good. NXT this week only did a 0.14 rating. Raw did a 0.58 rating. Most Wanted Treasures did a 0.14 rating. Stone Cold Takes on America, 0.07 rating. Rampage, 0.07. It's funny that Rampage is doing so bad and Dynamite numbers are down. Granted, I mean, they're having success for the Wembley Stadium show, and they're better competition than anyone in the modern era has been to WWE. But it's funny that Rampage is only doing a 0.07, and they're adding a third show. Is this going to put Rampage down even more because that's more content to watch? I don't know. As long as they're getting the money from the TV station, why not? I guess. But again, this new show is going to be called AEW Collision. It's going to air from 8 to 10 on TNT Saturday nights, 2-hour program. Well, there was speculation CM Punk is going to be on the show. It's now unsure if he's going to be on because I guess he's friends with a guy named Ace Steel, who I have really no idea who this person is. And part of the deal of Punk coming back is supposed to be Ace Steel getting an agent's job. What his qualifications are to be an agent other than being CM Punk's friend, who knows? But apparently Tony Khan wanted him to work remotely, and Punk wants him to actually be at the shows. And there's a lot of heat because I guess this Ace Steel during this backstage brawl with the Bucks and Kenny Omega, Ace Steel bit Kenny Omega and hit one of the Bucks, Nick Jackson, with a chair. Now that is dirty fighting. And I've seen pictures of this guy. Isn't he much bigger than the Young Bucks? What the hell is he doing using a chair? And I've never met the Young Bucks. I have no issues with them. I've never met Kenny Omega. I have no issues with him. CM Punk, I've never been a fan of him, but I respect that he got over in wrestling. The other guy I don't know at all. But to me, that's just dirty fighting. I mean, you're fighting with a coworker backstage. It's not a life or death street fight. Do you really need to bite and use weapons? To me, that's especially the Young Bucks. Do you really need a weapon against the Young Bucks if you're bigger than them? No offense, but to me, I mean, I wouldn't give. I don't know the whole story, but I wouldn't give that guy a job back. To be perfectly honest. So yeah, even Mel. I mean, I heard Meltzer talk about this too. I won't even read it because I heard him talking about it. Like for Collision, we don't even know if it's going to air in Canada, and they have tapings in Toronto, Hamilton, Calgary, and Regina. Uh, and it's basically this. I mean, they're not supposedly. It's going to be. It might be a different roster with people like Thunder Rosa and Andrade coming back, which is Thunder Rosa really that over to help get enough people tune in? And Andrade, who was like a low card guy in WWE and is really only famous because he's married to Charlotte Flair and is Ric Flair's son-in-law. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a huge Punk fan, but it seems to me like Collision has very limited star power. I noticed Samoa Joe's on there. He's a good hand. MJF, he's popular amongst the AEW audience. I got nothing against MJF or Samoa Joe, my former tag team partner, but it seems like this Collision show, I mean, it's just going to maybe water down the product more, but they apparently the rumor is they might be making like 200 million a year or more from having these three shows custom to Warner Brother Media. So maybe the money outweighs the product getting watered down because Meltzer even brings up in this, as far as he's aware, he doesn't think 2022 was a profitable year in AEW. But he seems to think if they're going to get a deal for like 200 million a year, which is just like a number being floated around, if that is true, they could actually become profitable. And he mentions for a Saturday show to be successful, he thinks they would need the Elite, MJF, Jericho, Adam Cole, and others on both shows. Because if they don't, it'll just be another Rampage, and they already have Rampage. So then you got two Rampages. And I'm not hating on AEW. I'm just saying I'm totally neutral to all companies. By the way, MLW got canceled on Reels. There was no TV ratings for them because they no longer have a TV show on Reels, and they didn't post Impact's TV ratings, so who knows if they made a rating or not. AEW's upcoming video game, according to Fightful, might be released June 27th. Apparently, Young Rock was not on NBC's fall schedule. Kevin Von Erich, the entire family, including Ross and Marshall Von Erich, that for some reason were never on the MLW show, despite being under ML contract for another about 11 days. Because they said in an interview with John Paz that aired on this channel that their contracts ends in June. But with these MLW contracts, I don't know what the Von Erich boys were exactly, but I can tell you from other wrestlers that oftentimes in these MLW contracts, you only get paid if you wrestle, but they can hold you under contract and not let you wrestle for anyone else and not have to pay you, which seems like a horrible contract to sign. I don't know if that's the case with the Von Erichs, but I don't think they've wrestled for MLW for a very long time. Not at all this year. And I don't think they wrestled for them last fall either. And they're great wrestlers in my opinion, and they deserve a push in one of the two major companies. By the way, speaking of John Paz interviews, Brell from No Holds Barred, Kurt Fuller, who was also in Ghostbusters and Wayne's World, Did an interview with John Paz that I posted today on this channel, and I did talk to his agent, and I might be getting my own interview with him very soon, which would be cool because I am a big fan of No Holds Barred and Wayne's World and Ghostbusters. In MMA news, UFC on ABC May 13th had 18,712 fans in Charlotte, North Carolina, with a gate of over $2 million. This was an afternoon show. The prelims did a 0.22 rating. Main card did a 0.27 rating, which is apparently good for an afternoon show. But as we can see, wrestling overall, the main shows of wrestling, Dynamite, Raw, and SmackDown, still get better ratings than UFC, but the pay-per-views do better in UFC. Francis Ngannou signed a PFL fight deal. He's expected to start fighting next year. He turned down a huge amount of money to fight John Jones. Apparently, this is going to be a deal in the high seven figures. And part of the deal is opponents must make at least $2 million. I don't know, honestly. Ngannou is a great fighter, but I mean, they're also using. I saw the press conference with Jake Paul and Nate Diaz, and Nate Diaz, and I'm saying this in a nice way, he appears to have brain damage. And Captain's Corner, the captain, who I might be not get along with all the time, but I mean, I saw his autograph session with Nate Diaz, and he seriously appears to have concussion issues. I mean, I honestly don't know if this guy should get cleared to fight. That's just my opinion from watching the press conference and other interviews with Nate Diaz. But also, like, as great as Francis Ngannou is he that much of a draw to deserve the high seven figures per fight? I don't know. But this also comes down to what people have been saying. UFC doesn't pay that great overall for fighters. I mean, when was the last time they boosted the $50,000 bonuses, even though the company makes a shitload of money? Those $50,000 bonuses, weren't they there in the 90s? And now we've had like over 2 decades of inflation, but the bonuses are still $50,000. But like UFC doesn't really care if their star fighters don't fight or jump to other companies. So this is the interesting thing. Are they going to have the same situation with WWE? Are they going to, like, where Vince McMahon takes it very personally and like would never want like a John Cena to jump to AEW or Brock Lesnar to jump to AEW? Will UFC be like, we're number one, I don't care, we don't want to pay him that much, he can go? That would be interesting to see. Goldberg's still a free agent, by the way. Bellator, who you don't hear much about these days, had their biggest crowd in recent memory May 12th in Paris, France. 12,000 fans. There's a town I'd like to be in someday. I've never been. I would love to have the food. James can't believe that Billy Graham passed away. Well, he'd been in the hospital over 4 months. His organs were failing. I was very sad when he passed, and it was been a hard week since I found out he was on life support, but he was living in a hospital room, and he was pretty much deaf with diabetes, heart issues, kidneys failing, in tremendous physical pain, cancer. I mean, he lived to be 79. He turns 80 in June. Bruno Sammartino died at 82. I mean, look at. I mean, I will say this, and I was telling someone this yesterday. Billy Graham was never really a drinker. He did take speed here and there, but he wasn't like a party drug user. He did take a lot of steroids, a ridiculous amount of steroids, but he he hadn't taken them since like the early 90s. Other than I believe he was on testosterone replacement therapy towards the end. But like he lived pretty long considering the massive amounts of steroids he took. But I'm gonna do a whole episode on Billy Graham tomorrow. But by the way, one thing I will bring up. I'm glad WWE did a video on him for YouTube, and you guys can tell me if anything was said on SmackDown. But when they said the WWE family has lost a family member, he was one of the people that was banned from being shown on the Thunderdome in signs, or you couldn't show, even though they were selling toys of him and making money off of like toys and T-shirts of Billy. And I believe he may have even still been under a Legends contract on this time. I don't know. Meltzer brought up he wasn't under one since 2015. I don't know what all the details of the Legends contract, but I believe if you can't like do autograph sessions, or like I don't know if you receive a small amount every week or not, but like you're paid according to what they make of you, and they make toys and all this crap of you, which is great. I'm glad he got paydays for that type of stuff. But he was one of the. You guys can look it up. He was banned from the Thunderdome, which is kind of funny. But yeah, any potential WrestleMania in Canada? I've heard nothing about that. Jason, my day's been great. I had a phenomenal workout and run today. Been hanging out with Piper, who's sound asleep beside me. How huge was Batista physically? I think Batista might be a bit taller than Billy Graham. I know Billy Graham lost height over the years, but I seem to recall Batista was about the same height as me. More muscular than me. But Billy Graham, I mean, I only knew him in his later years, but he was like 4 or 5 inches shorter than me. Someone says in 10 years, Texas will be like California. Junior, yeah, well, I might visit North Carolina one day. I'm not opposed to it. Matthew likes the Von Erichs. I love No Holds Barred, Joseph. It's one of my favorite movies. That's how much of a wrestling fan I am, and I was very honored to interview Zeus. And actually, I felt I was friends with Zeus because I've told the story before. I won't tell it again, but I definitely had a connection with Zeus. Great guy, deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Someone from Pasadena, Texas says hello. R.I.P. Scott Hall, indeed. But I will say this: the WWE family didn't help pay for Billy Graham's medical stuff, and they paid a shitload for Scott Hall's rehab. That in the end, it didn't work. And yeah, I was also sad when Scott Hall died because that was like he didn't seem that old. And it was like, man, Scott Hall's dead. Man, it just seemed like yesterday he was debuting on WCW. I'm getting old. Someone says Arn Anderson, the most underrated worker of all time. He's a good mechanic, but as far as a draw, I don't know if he was ever a draw. He looked like your average person pretty much. I like him, but I would say he's put over as a great worker all the time, so I wouldn't say he's underrated. Yes, at least Superstar is not suffering anymore. At least he's not suffering, and hopefully his wife Valerie, who has been married to him since she was 19. Like, I love Billy. I truly love him. But like he's been like quite a burden on Valerie her entire life. So maybe I know she's at least 10 years younger than him, maybe less, maybe at least for the remainder of her life she can have some peace and some time of not having to worry about him. My friend actually met Valerie this week and said she's actually still very beautiful. So Billy Graham was a blessed man, and I was blessed to know him. And as I said, we'll do a whole podcast talking about Billy, and I'll go over the huge detail that Dave Meltzer spoke about with Billy probably tomorrow. And by the way, Jack Victory is doing an interview with me Sunday night. So have a great weekend, Victoria Day weekend here in Canada.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoots.